Today's episode is brought to you by Sports Business Classroom. Landing a job in the NBA is no easy feat. One surefire way to put yourself in front of a competitive talent pool is if you master the collective bargaining agreement. And now you can, with a course developed by the godfather of the CBA himself, Larry Kuhn. Larry Kuhn has been teaching the CBA to teams, agents, media, and students for over 20 years, and now you can master the CBA through his online video on-demand course, which is now available to the public. If you're looking to break into basketball or even just set yourself apart, this is the competitive advantage you are looking for. To learn more about the video on-demand course that is being taken by teams and agents all over the world, please visit sportsbusinessclassroom.com today. Okay, what's up, guys, and welcome back to the NTC podcast. I'm here with Aaron, ready to break down some really fun NBA, kind of all these, we're kind of heading into the playoffs now, but we're going to kind of break down a lot of these teams that maybe won't be making the playoffs. They've kind of already been eliminated, but they have some really interesting stuff coming up for them, whether it's this year in free agency, with a lot of their signings, a lot of their salary cap situations are really flexible. And there's a lot of things that could be changing with some of them. So Aaron, really excited to jump right into this because you had the great idea a couple episodes ago to talk about which of these teams that maybe aren't making the play-in are still fun to watch. A few of these teams are back here on this list because they're just going to be very important to keep an eye on for this upcoming offseason.
I mean, you said it, John. Previously, when we discussed some of these teams that we're going to go over again, as you mentioned, it was more about taking a look at certain players on the rosters that were worth keeping an eye on, like Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, guys of that caliber. Now it's taking more of like a bird's eye view to their futures. So now we're trying to look at where they stand today and how they kind of ride off into the sunset in the last week of the season here as we're recording this. So we're looking at, their pick situation as far as like where they might fall in the lottery, their cap situation, free agents, things like that. So now we're kind of going in a different direction, looking in the future. But excited for that because all of these teams are worth following for one reason or another. They've all had troublesome seasons. They didn't win a ton of games, but there are certain things in place for each of them that give them hope looking forward to next season and beyond. So excited to cover that for sure.
Definitely. And to start off with one of these teams, one of them being the Wizards. Now, the big question mark with them, going into this offseason is, can they keep Bradley Beal happy? Obviously, that's always been, he's been someone that's in trade talks or just in rumors for kind of years now. I feel like it's almost been like literally 2 or 3 years that it's been a question mark of, is he going to resign? Is he going to stick around? Is he happy there? Can they build a team around him that can actually compete and make the playoffs? And this, looking at their salary cap situation, like if you go on the NTC website, which obviously anyone listening to this show should be doing routinely, going and checking that out. There's a lot of colors on their salary cap sheet because there's a lot of guys that either have, whether it's player options, team options, right? They might be restricted unrestricted free agents this coming off season. The Wizards have a lot of flexibility and they have a lot of decisions to make this coming season. I'm curious which ones you think might be the most important and impactful for them going forward in kind of seeing how this nucleus can stick together for a little longer than some Wizards teams have in the past.
Yep. The big strength for Washington this season was their depth. Now they got derailed because Bradley Beal, I think it was back in February, he got shut down. He had to have surgery on his finger, I believe. So that took away some of their top end talent, which forced guys like Kuzma and Porzingis post trade to kind of come in and make an impact for them. And that's not really their roles. They're not suited to be number one options. So that's where they struggled. And, if we go back to earlier in the season, the first half of the season, Washington was doing very well. They occupy the role that Boston and Toronto, those teams now occupy, that role of kind of exceeding expectations, just really playing well because they had multiple bodies they can throw at teams every night. So it was KCP, it was Kuzma, it was, guys like that, go Daniel Gafford, you go down the roster. They're very balanced. It's a very balanced team, deep team. Montrezl Harrell, prior to the trade, those guys meant a lot to that team. And it's unfortunate that Beal went down because the team was actually very well off in terms of the depth. Now, looking forward to this coming offseason, the big question for them is, how do they continue to tinker this roster around Beal to kind of keep him happy? Because Beal has a $36 million player option for next season. He can take it, opt in, and give the Wizards another year to kind of see where things stand in terms of the roster. Or he can just say, I'm done with it. I'm just going to try my luck somewhere else and decline that option, or maybe even decline it and then re-sign for a bigger deal, which for a player of his caliber is going to be exceedingly expensive. Now, as we know with cap, how things work with bird rights, he can re-sign with that team and there's not really anything prohibiting that team from offering him the absolute max because the rights belong to Washington, and he has 9 years of service. So I mean, he falls in that 7 to 9 range. He's not quite at 10 years. He would have to play another season. So he has different options. I mean, it's kind of hard to say what he's going to do. Does he opt in and then go back into free agency next year where he can get the absolute top tier max? Or does he just say, you know what, I'm going to opt out. I'm going to get my money now while I can because you never know what could happen. So that's kind of like what's interesting about his situation. And then, as you kind of alluded to earlier, there's other players. Ish Smith is not guaranteed for next season. KCP is not guaranteed, but I expect them to keep him around because 14 mil isn't that big of a deal for him. And then other guys, as you go down the roster, Thomas Bryant, Neto, Anthony Gill, Satoransky, all those guys coming off the books. If it's you, John, and you have the option to either keep Thomas Bryant on this team, re-sign him, or go in a different direction, where do you go? Gafford does have a raise coming up, but for next season, he's only owed $1.9 million. They have some options, but it kind of seems like Thomas Bryant might be the odd man out after being a starter last season before he got hurt. What do you think about that situation?
Yeah, Thomas Bryant, when he's playing, he's been really, really good for the Wizards. The issue is that hasn't happened a lot ever, really in his entire career with them and stuff. Obviously, dealing with some really messy injuries and stuff. But when he's playing, he's really good. I mean, really looking at who the Wizards get in free agency, I can't remember the last time the Wizards made a big splash in free agency or just any sort of splash for a guy that could really just come in and be a legit starting center on a team that for them. Their goal is obviously to make the playoffs and be a little competitive. I don't know who that would be for them this summer. So I would feel like if you obviously they know much more about this than we do. If they think that they can keep him healthy and that he can be the player that he's been when he's healthy, I see no issue with them re-signing him because he's been someone that has shown when he's playing he's really good. Obviously, they want to see him with Porzingis more, how that fits. And what are the guys they have around him? But he's shown that when he's able to play, he's more than capable to be a really good starting big man for them. So I think they should be more than happy to keep him. And I'm sure Bradley Beal would be okay with that. It's more so what are the pieces you put around that that kind of mixture over there to see how that all plays out.
For sure. Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with that. Looking at Brian's contract, coming off the books, it's not all that much. So, if they want to re-sign him, he's coming off an injury, so he probably won't be that expensive. They could probably get him for a mid-level or something like that. And, they had a logjam in the front court, but since they shipped off Montrez, that's not really a problem anymore. So they really could just keep him on board as a backup center, which should be fine. Or maybe have Gafford as the backup. They could go either way with that. But like you said, Washington, the center position hasn't been a real serious area of strength for them recently. I think the last really good center they had was it Marcin Gortat? Unless I'm forgetting somebody, that's kind of like the last guy I think of. So, but another thing that's intriguing about the roster is they have a lot of mid-level contracts. So if you go look at it, you'll see KCP at next season for 14, non-guaranteed. Kuzma at 13, which I think is actually a bargain. If we're talking about bargains in the NBA, Kuzma at just over the mid-level is not a bad contract at all. But what they could do is they can consolidate and then move those contracts for a star caliber guy. Not sure who they go for. That's kind of where things get tricky. But if they wanted to, they could kind of consolidate and they can go out and find a higher tier player. So we'll have to see how that goes. But the clock is ticking, the pressure is on. How do you keep Beal around? That's the main question for them, because if they lose Beal, they're really going to be back at square one. But if they keep him around at least for another year, you have Porzingis, you have KCP still. They have some guys that can play. Hachimura has been solid, so they're going to be a good team. They just won't be able to kind of break into the next tier of NBA rankings until they really go out there and get themselves another star, which it's easier said than done because those guys don't come around very often.
Definitely. When thinking about maybe who, let's say they were to move on from him, and like you said, really make that big splash, make Bradley Beal really happy, and get him that second star, whoever that would look like. One of the teams we're going to talk about with the Portland Trailblazers and Nurkic, we don't know what might be happening with him and their situation, right? They've kind of been almost on a fire sale with a lot of their recurring starters. So what if some of that were to happen where Washington was looking to do something there? DeAndre Ayton, another guy that, obviously him being a very good player and obviously way younger, and that would be a huge thing for the Wizards. But he's someone that his situation in Phoenix has been really a big question mark for the last year, with them not wanting to re-sign him earlier and him obviously being very upset about that. if the Wizards really wanted to make a statement that, hey, we're really serious about being competitive, those are just two options that I'm looking at, thinking that, those aren't too unrealistic for them to really maneuver the salary cap and make those possible.
So you're saying Damian Lillard could be an option for them if they really wanted to make a splash on that team?
I would say more Nurkic. I would say more Nurkic as that
Oh,
big.
Nurkic.
If Thomas Bryant
Yeah.
wanted to work out for them, maybe getting him in that action. If it's not, if Portland keeps their trend of really showing that they're going to really revamp their team, Nurkic looks like he's kind of going to stick around for that. But if he's not, I don't see why Washington wouldn't be a solid home for him, depending on what they do with Thomas Bryant.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely an interesting option for them. Nurkic, a free agent to be here, summer of 22, shouldn't be too expensive. I mean, you really kind of have to. You can't be too picky when you're looking at free agents here because I mean it's not a deep class this year because more and more we're seeing these guys get locked up in advance. There's not a lot of stars or even tier 2 or 3 guys that hit free agency anymore. So you really have to trade for these guys in this day and age. Unless you're talking about like a normal starting level guy, which is Nurkic. He's not an all-star. He's not a complete difference maker by himself. But if they did want to go in a different direction, they wanted to try somebody else, he's definitely someone they could look at. Solid playmaker, solid passer from the position. He has some offensive skills he brings to the table, a little bit of a jump shot, which is a different look from some of their other bigs. So I do like that. He just might not be necessary for them with the 2 bigs they do have at their disposal. I got to thinking of Damian Lillard because, you were talking about Blazers and like, that's the first name that popped into my head. I think about that and I'm sure, he might not even ask for a trade because he's loyal and that's who Damian Lillard is. But imagine that pairing for a second. Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal on the Wizards would be absolutely incredible. And I mean, the Wizards have the contracts to make it happen. I mean, they have a bunch of guys in that mid tier. And as far as I know, they have some picks to offer. So, I mean, if the Blazers really had to move Dame and Dame said, I'm cool with Washington, that would be an exciting pairing. I would love to see them in action. They'd be instantly one of the best backcourts in basketball.
No question. You're putting 2 guys. I mean, the spacing would be incredible. They're built. I mean, those are 2 guys that have always been on teams that really couldn't get over the hump, and seeing them come together might really be the difference maker for them. And we were talking a little bit about, right? You mentioned kind of Portland, that end of an era for them. Looking at their cap, if they weren't to go in that direction, I'm trying to think what other way. I mean, if to really, I mean, shipping out Lillard would obviously be a big monumental case, but if they kept him, there's still a few other moves they can make. I mean, you have a lot of guys on non-guarantees like Eric Bledsoe, Josh Hart. Obviously, Josh Hart being a key piece of one of the trades they just made. But other guys, right, that are still could be restricted free agents, like an Anthony Simons, who many would say, I mean, you've probably seen the videos of him like really doing moves and looking just like Damian Lillard, like the splitting image almost. So, I mean, what if they were to get rid of some of those guys or to position themselves? I feel like most of those guys they re-sign. Joe Ingles being another guy that is set up for unrestricted free agency. We already mentioned Nurkic. Ingles, everyone's kind of thinking is going to go back to the Jazz, but other than that, there's still a lot of guys that could move around or that could stay put. And the Blazers would still have cap space to really become to make some other moves that would make them a whole different team next year, and maybe one that can actually make the playoffs and be a little competitive.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at their cap sheet right now, John, and I mean this is their cap situation is very interesting because not only do they have non-guaranteed contracts like you mentioned, they have a lot of guys going into free agency. We just talked about Nurkic. Joe Ingles is pretty much gone. I mean, he was trade bait essentially. Simons, Macklemore. You go down the roster. I mean, they have 7 guys going into some sort of free agency, either restricted or unrestricted, with another 2 guys that's non-guaranteed. So you go down to the cap sheet here on notradeclause.com. Shameless plug. You guys need to check that out. But I mean, they only have 62 million in guaranteed contracts. So if they wanted to, they could renounce the rights of just about everybody there except for Simons, maybe keep Josh Hart. I mean, they can really open up some space. Now, the problem with that is they're not a free agent destination. So what would they do with that space? One option that was made clear to me from reading one of Danny LaRue's articles on The Athletic, he was talking about the Grizzlies. One thing you can do with cap space is you could do an imbalanced trade, which means you can trade, have outgoing salary, and then bring in more incoming salary so that you can accommodate some bloated contract that another team has. You take that in exchange for maybe a player that you want or picks that you want. So that's something that they can do with the cap space. You don't have to only use it for free agents. Like, I'm going to go sign insert superstar here, like the Knicks. We're going to sign KD. We're going to sign Kyrie. Sorry to bring the Knicks into this, man. I know that's the sore spot right now. It sucks that they have to be the kind of the example here, but all that to say, they have so many options on this roster. So even if they do keep Damian Lillard in his $42 million contract on the books, they can pivot in a different direction. They can retool this roster. I've heard people around that circle say they're not going to tear down the team. They're going to retool the team. That's why they made the Norman Powell trade. That's why they made the Robert Covington trade, not to go into the cellar and start tanking, but to kind of, reset and then kind of see where they're at. So it's going to be tough because there aren't a lot of guys that are available. The free agent class, like we mentioned earlier, is not all that great, but at least they have some money available to them. So if something did happen, someone wanted to play with Dame so bad, they had to make it happen, the Blazers can accommodate. So that is very interesting for sure. And I mean, we can't talk about their future without talking about their pick situation. According to Basketball Reference, they have an 87% chance of landing in the 6th pick, a 5% chance of going up to the 5th pick. As of today, the standings can still change with a week left, but that's as of today. So what do you think about their future, John? Are you optimistic about what they can do here moving forward? Or do you think all this cap space and all these possibilities are going to be for nothing and they're just going to have another blown year of Damian Lillard's prime?
Whenever it comes to discussing a team, like, do they know who they are? The Blazers, obviously, whether they know who they are, they think they know who they are, they're going all in and making a set decision on this is who we think we are. This is what we're going to do about our situation. And they're set in stone on that. They're not second guessing themselves. They're not, some teams who think that they're better than they are. They know, okay, we're going to rebuild our roster. We're going to change things up. We're going to give ourselves flexibility, and that's what they've been doing for the last year now. So they know what they're trying to do, and they're going towards that. So I'm not going to say that it would be for nothing because there's obviously a goal in mind. Now, if it comes out, being successful for them, and the picks actually translate and they pick properly, or they're actually able to use the money towards guys that live up to their contracts, that's a whole different story. But they're obviously putting the process in place, and it's been the same for long enough to where they'll get a good shot at making this work. Whether or not it works or not is obviously up to the basketball gods and a lot of other factors. But so far, the end of one era in Portland that really was peaked with that one trip to the Western Conference Finals. But that might be a closed chapter in their book. But whatever the chapters coming next, their eyes are set on that. They're not really looking in the rearview mirror. They're set looking forward, and that's a pretty good thing. Whatever happens with these picks or with some of these upcoming decisions that they make, they're going in the right direction, most likely in seeing how they can be different from the ways they've been in the past.
Yeah, I mean, the ways they've been in the past were not too shabby. They had pretty much 10 straight seasons of playoff appearances going back to 2012. I mean, could we just reminisce for a second on how cool of a run that was and all they were able to accomplish in that Dame CJ era? Like, they didn't win a championship. They didn't win 60 games. They didn't do anything really insane. But, I mean, they were just so solid for so long. And there's something to be said about that. If you can continuously field really solid teams year after year, compete, that's not easy to do. It's hard to win in the NBA, and it's even harder to do it consistently over an extended period. So CJ McCollum is off doing his own thing in the Pelicans, and they're kind of vying for a play-in spot right now. But that was such a fun pairing. Dame and CJ, I will miss those days, and I really hope for the best for Damian Lillard because he's stuck his neck out for this team multiple times. There's so many years he could have asked for a trade. He could have said, I'm out, I'm done. But he's sticking it out. He's really kind of giving the team the best of his career, maybe his entire career, who knows. And I think he deserves at least one more decent chance to have a good, solid roster around him. So hopefully the new management in Portland can make that happen and then get back to the playoffs. If they get a solid pick, if they get a top 5 pick here in this draft, I mean, that's intriguing as well. And it gives them some insurance just in case Dame says peace and wants to explore greener pastures. But we'll deal with that as the time comes. But nevertheless, really great era for Portland. And this next era should be exciting as well, with or without Dame Dollar.
Definitely, there's a couple other teams that are right going into a completely new era, and they've been, whether it's getting the first pick in the last draft and probably this draft. The Pistons are one of the teams that you're actually super. You're a big proponent of them on League Pass. You're obviously you're notorious for being a League Pass fanatic, I would say, or just really a big. You use your subscription wisely, I would say. I'll leave it at that. But you're really on watching a lot of basketball there, and you've been watching a team that's at the bottom of the standings. And I want to know why, because obviously maybe their cap situation is interesting. They're young, they're fun, but what really makes that team something that you're actually really starting to pay attention to?
Listen, I know what the public are thinking right now. The Pistons, man, really, there's so many other teams you could watch. You could watch the Celtics, you could watch the Raptors, all these other teams that are doing great things right now. But I mean, the Pistons are doing great things too. I mean, they deserve a little bit of credit, a little bit of hype. They've had some solid wins over the past few weeks. And there's one player in particular that we talked about before we went on the air that's turned his career around. Marvin Bagley III deserves a lot of credit. And you had some numbers before we went on this episode, multiple 20-point games over the past 10 games or so. He's revitalized his career. He's rejuvenated himself. He's rejuvenated the Pistons roster, because you go looking up and down this roster, they have a lot of I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. I don't want to sound disrespectful. Finesse players or guys with a lot of skill, but not a lot of like energy. And I don't know.
A lot of Bo Estes NBA top 10 candidates, but
yeah,
that's the end of the line.
That's a good way to put it. But I mean, Marvin Bagley is a different type of energy. I mean, he's going to catch crazy lobs. You're going to throw it up to where it looks like it's going to go out of bounds. He's going to finish it. He's going to come out of nowhere for a putback, a ball coming off the rim for an offensive rebound. He's going to make a crazy block out of nowhere. He's going to come from the weak side and send something into the fifth row. That's the kind of energy. That's the kind of spontaneous, revelation that the Pistons needed. And I think it's really done wonders for them. Now with Jeremy Grant being on the shelf, Bagley has stepped into the void, really does some great things for him. Killian Hayes is starting to figure it out. I mean, he had a really rough start to his career, but he started to kind of lean into his calling as a shifty, crafty guard. Not a ton of athleticism, but he's figuring out how to make the right reads, game in and game out, make good decisions, be a solid team player. Saddiq Bey, man, he joined the 50-point club last month. I mean, that's no small feat. I mean, a guy that's on he's on a $2.8 million rookie deal. He dropped 50. I mean, that's pretty good ROI right there. That return on investment is very solid. So my big reason for watching the Pistons, I just wanted to see if there were signs of growth there. And I think that's abundantly clear that there are currently. So I think Jeremy Grant, they can keep him around. They can ship him off. I think next year they should really try to trade him. A $20 million expiring contract for a really solid starting four. I think it's a very enticing contract. And Kelly Olynyk is another trade piece that they could kind of make a move with. And I mean, they're in the mix for another top pick. Just looking at their percentages right now, I mean, they could get the third pick, fourth pick, fifth pick. All those are pretty likely at this point. Maybe even a little higher, depending on how the last few games go. So exciting times in the Motor City, man. And all you guys that are writing off the Pistons, saying that they're an illegitimate League Pass team, just give them a chance. Give them a chance. I mean, they beat a pretty nice team the other day. Yeah, I mean, Detroit had a very solid win against the Sixers as well not too long ago. So obviously something's going right in Detroit. They're gaining traction. The picks are working out. Cade Cunningham is looking like a real stud. A choppy beginning, but I mean, that's to be expected. He missed the first few games. And I mean, it's the beginning of his career. So, I mean, there was somewhere he had to start from, but he's worked his way up every month, every week. You look at the numbers, it get better and better. So I think he's going to live up to the billing as the number one pick, and he's going to have a great career. So across the roster, I mean, they have energy, they have grit, they fight. I mean, they don't lay down. I'll bring up the Lakers for a second, since I brought up the Knicks. I think it's only fair to bring up the Lakers. They fight, man. I mean, I honestly, at this point, I enjoy watching the Pistons more than the Lakers. I mean, imagine saying that back in like November. That seems like blasphemy, but it's true. That's just how I feel. So, you have any kind of closing thoughts on the Pistons here at all? I don't know if you watched them at all here recently.
Definitely feel you on that one. I could definitely, and I haven't seen them too much recently, but I could definitely see how a team with the makeup you just described could be fun to watch, despite right, maybe not having the glitz and the glam of the Lakers. It's still right. I mean, if you're a real basketball enthusiast, you'll find a way to watch them and say, you know what, this team has some pieces that I actually like. They actually run some good stuff. They actually are pretty interesting to watch. And we're obviously talking about League Pass. Luckily, luckily we're entering playoff season, so we won't even need League Pass in a little bit because of obviously all the good nationally televised fire playoff games. About to see all kind of nothing overlapping, all kind of happening at different points of the day. Kind of those beautiful first round matchups where you have games starting at noon here on the East Coast. So some great stuff like that coming up. And until then, want to make sure everyone takes advantage. I know the early bird pricing just passed, but the business of basketball is coming up really, really soon at sports right in Vegas. We'll both be there, right, working NBA Summer League, and you see it down below in the ticker if you're on video. If you're not, we'll have it in the description, and obviously, it's all over our NTC's website. The business of basketball immersive experience. It's gonna be can't miss this year in Vegas, and you may have just missed the early bird pricing window, but there's still so many reasons to do it that we've obviously reiterated multiple times on the show. I mean, really encourage all our viewers to check it out.
100%. I mean, I echo what John is saying about the business of basketball experience. We took part, but in the past, and this is a chance to take part in Vegas. I mean, what better way to kind of get your foot in the door of the NBA world than to kind of get a front row seat, so to speak, to some of the best action in the world? I mean, it's a family reunion of some of the biggest minds in basketball. So that's something you can't pass up. If you have the opportunity, definitely check it out. We have the link down here below if you're watching this on YouTube. sportsbusinessclassroom.com. Go check them out. Get involved. You won't regret it. Promise. We're living witnesses. So definitely get involved, guys. You won't regret it.